These movements are protective. They're designed to keep us safe. What we're going to focus on tonight are these purposeful movements. These are our intentional movements. They're triggered by a thought or an idea. And they're the most difficult type of movement typically for our spellers. Then our fourth type of movement are going to be our overlearned movements. You're also going to hear me refer to these as automatic movements. And so these are things that we've practiced over time until they've become automatic for us, right? So these might be purposeful movements that have become automatic that are particularly helpful to us. Or they might be reflexive or impulsive movements that we've practiced over time that have become automatic, that stand in our way. But tonight we're really going to hone in on those purposeful movements. So let's talk about purposeful motor. Purposeful movements are triggered by a thought, idea, desire, or instruction. They have some sort of cognitive thought as their initiator, right? And these come from our highest cortical regions. So if we look at the brain on this slide, the pink section is that cortical region. And this you can think of as our logical, intentional thinking brain. As opposed to this brown section that you see, which is our subcortical region. And you can think of this as survival brain, right? So our purposeful movements are being initiated in that cortical region, our logical, intentional thinking brain. And what's coming from the subcortical region are those protective movements. Impulsive, react, reflexive. Those are what's coming from that survival brain. These movements are particularly challenging for our spellers because these are long, slow motor pathways. You can see by looking at the diagram that we've got to go further to get to the body to get there from that cortical region. But these movements are often new or novel motor actions. And so they take longer to get that message from the brain to the body. These are all movements that happen on demand, and they're all governed by the process of praxis. So let's talk a little bit about praxis. Praxis is the ability to execute chains of smooth motor movement. And this is the process that governs all of our intentional movement all day long, right? If I am feeling thirsty and need to get a drink of water, if I am notice that I'm cold and I want to go get a blanket, right? Any of these intentional movements are governed by the process of praxis. And this process has 4 steps. The first is ideation. So truly just having the idea that I need to do something, right? That this is my intention. Then we have sequencing and organizing. And in this step, what we're going to do is put in order all the steps that it's going to take to be able to complete the movement. Then we're going to actually execute the movement. And after we've gone wrong, we're going to adapt and we're going to make some changes. So I am going to do a little demonstration of this, right? Feel free to kind of do it along with me. But if I'm feeling thirsty, I've got my water just over here to my right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that idea, right? That I need to get a drink of water. Step 1, ideation, done. I've got that idea. Now I'm going to sequence and organize in my brain all the steps that need to happen to do that, right? And as neurotypical people, it's easy for us to make that into a chain. And so I'm going to think, okay, I want to shift my eyes and find the cup. I'm going to stretch my arm out. I'm going to open my hand. I'm going to close my hand around the cup. I'm going to bend my elbow to bring it to me. I'm going to pull the straw to my mouth. I'm going to cover the straw with my mouth. I'm going to use the muscles inside my mouth to pull the water into the straw and up into my mouth. Then I'm going to do everything in reverse. I'm going to pull that straw back down. I'm going to straighten my arm. I'm going to open my hand. I'm going to pull my arm back. So you can see there's so many steps associated with this one simple movement that I've had to sequence and organize to be able to make it flow appropriately. I'm going to execute the movement, right? So that was actually moving through it, is what execution is going to look like. If I were to reach over and come back with my phone instead of my cup, now I've got to adapt, right? So now I've got to start the process over and work back through it to be able to make the adaptation and get my cup. This is a process that we as neurotypical people often take for granted because it flows really smoothly for us. For our spellers, it's not the same situation. When it doesn't flow smoothly, we're dealing with apraxia. And so ASHA defines apraxia as the brain has problems planning to move the body parts, the lips, jaw, tongue, etc., that are needed for speech. The child knows what he or she wants to say, but his or her brain has difficulty coordinating the muscle movements necessary to say these words. And so we know that a lot of our spellers struggle with this as far as speech is concerned, but we can also extrapolate that to the entire body, right? The brain has problems planning to move the body parts, arms, legs, feet, hands, eyes. The individual knows what he or she wants to do, but the brain has difficulty coordinating the muscle movements necessary to follow through with these motor actions. So this is exactly what we call the brain-body disconnect, right? And that's what it is. It's a breakdown in that process of praxis and a disconnect between the brain and the body. The brain knows what it wants to do. The body has a hard time following through because getting the message from the brain to the body is challenging. This is what makes purposeful motor hard. When I have a thought, I've got to move through that whole process of praxis that doesn't happen in those protective movements and be able to connect my brain and my body. We know our spellers struggle with that. So why do we want to practice purposeful motor? Right? First, we want to create functional motor plans. When we are doing and practicing a motor action, we can either be practicing it in a way that is functional for us and sets us up with a motor plan that is going to help us, or we practice it in a way that is maybe not functional, right? And we've all heard that practice makes perfect. But in reality, practice makes permanent, right? I want to go back to those automatic, overlearned movements that I had mentioned earlier. The way that a movement becomes automatic is it starts as either a purposeful motor action or an impulsive motor action. And the more we practice that motor plan, a fatty sheath wraps around the neurons and it makes them faster and more efficient. And the faster and more efficient they become, the easier it is to carry out that movement. And so we want to practice purposeful motor because we want to make sure that we're making our purposeful, intentional movements faster and more effective, rather than making our impulsive movements faster and more effective. We want to make sure we're setting our spellers up for success as far as motor is concerned. In practicing purposeful motor, we can also strengthen the connection between the brain and the body. When I'm coaching someone through a purposeful motor action, what I'm able to do is provide an external feedback loop. So that instead of the internal feedback, right, that message from the brain to the body to the brain, that can be challenging. And so I can offer an external feedback loop so that we don't have to rely just on the internal. And ultimately, what we're doing there is strengthening that connection between the brain and the body. And then ultimately, when we create functional motor patterns, we strengthen the connection between the brain and the body, we develop more motor control. And that's going to lead just to more opportunities, whether those are educational opportunities, being able to control my body while I sit in a classroom, or employment opportunities, or independence with a certain skill that your speller is particularly interested in. More motor control offers us more opportunities. So that's all great, right? But how are we going to practice this purposeful motor? What I found, right, is that no one wants to schedule one more thing into your life. So I'm going to encourage you, especially all of you parents that are here tonight, to incorporate purposeful motor into as many of your daily activities that you're already working on as you can. If you're going on a walk, we're going to talk about how to include some there. You're certainly doing chores around the house. Let your spellers help out. And if you're working on S2C lessons already, I'm going to give you some ideas for being able to incorporate as much purposeful motor practice into those as possible. So let's start with walking. Walking itself is not actually a purposeful movement, right? Walking is going to be one of those automatic, overlearned movements that we're dealing with, because it's something that we've practiced so much that once we get started, we're not having to think about the steps involved in walking. The same is true of running or using an elliptical machine or riding a stationary bike. Once we get started, we're not having to think about those movements anymore. So to give walking or running or riding a bike some purposeful motor, we're going to add it in, right? We're going to add in the purpose. The first thing that I would encourage is practice starting and stopping intentionally. Initiation and termination of a movement are often the hardest parts for our spellers, getting started or stopping once they've gotten their body started. So we can practice that while on a walk, right? Maybe we say, okay, I'm going to start at this mailbox and we're going to stop when we get to the next mailbox. And that way you're building in that practice for starting and stopping the body. You can also create short goals, right? So maybe you're going to stomp until you reach the next light pole, or you're going to walk sideways into the end of the driveway. Maybe you're going to skip to the end of the sidewalk. Whatever you can add in, right, as this shake up a little bit, as this change to your activity is going to add in some purpose. You can also add exercises. So if you're walking at a park, maybe every time you pass a bench, you're going to do 5 squats. Or every time you pass a dog, you're going to do 3 jumping jacks. Or at the end of every mile, you're going to add 10 push-ups. But what you're doing is truly adding in a purposeful motor action so that we're having to add some thought and intentionality to the movement. And then finally, include your favorite tunes, right? Use that playlist to your advantage. What you can do is find some songs that are different rhythms, right? And practice walking at that pace. So maybe we've got something fast and really upbeat, and we're practicing getting our body moving a little bit faster. Or we've got a song that's slow and steady, and we're going to practice slowing our body down to walk to that rhythm, right? The control of the pace is what's going to add purpose in this bit. Communication is key here, right? If we're going to add any of these things in, we want to be very clear with the individual that's practicing their purposeful motor about what we're adding and why. And we want to make sure that they understand, okay, we're going to start here, we're going to stop there, right? And so all that takes is just a conversation, but we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page before we get started. The other thing to note here is don't feel like you have to do all of these things at the same time. If purposeful motor is something that's new to your speller, start slow. Pick the action that seems the most possible for you guys at this point, and add in more as your motor skills improve, as you get more practice. All right, next, let's talk about weighting. Weighting is something that we all do, right? Whether you're at the doctor's office or in the Spelling to Communicate practitioner's waiting room, or you're waiting for a table at a restaurant, or you're waiting in a grocery line. We're all waiting at certain points. And that can be really tricky for someone who doesn't have great motor control, because holding your body still requires a lot of control. So let's use that time to practice some purposeful motor, right? Try out a body engager. A body engager is exactly what it sounds like. It's any activity that is going to truly engage the body. I have some of my favorites that I'm going to show you, but this is certainly not an exhaustive list. Anything that is going to have purpose behind it, right? A body engager is going to be different than a fidget, something we just hold in our hands and kind of mess with while we're waiting. If it doesn't have purpose behind it, and fidgets serve a purpose, right? They support some regulation, but if it doesn't have a motor purpose behind it, then it's not truly a body engager. So some of my favorites, I love sticker by number puzzles. These are something that you can keep in your purse or in the car. And they're a picture that has different spaces, right? And these have letters on them. And then in the back of the book, you've got stickers that have the same letters. And so it's sort of like paint by number, only you're using stickers rather than paint, right? And these come in all different levels. So if you need something that is going to be simple for fine motor, starting with one that has just a few stickers and spaces is a great place to start. But you can raise the challenge with something like this. Or I have them for my guys who have really honed their fine motor, where we've got lots and lots of stickers, right? So there's all different levels, and that's true of many of these body engagers. I also like dot to dots. These are great for ocular motor and some of that fine motor practice as well. One of my favorites for in the car or in a line is something like this, right? All of the pieces are contained in this plastic case, and you have a picture, and then you use this magnet piece, right, to pull the dots up to where they go in the picture. I love this if you are working with somebody who has less motor control and we might bump something or knock it off a table, right? Because all the pieces are contained here, we're not going to have to completely start from scratch, which can sometimes be frustrating. This is called dot art. And I found it online. There are a lot of different things that are very similar, but this is a fun one if you're looking to work on a little bit of that motor control while you're waiting. And again, what I'm showing you is certainly not an exhaustive list. If you can think of, right, I have clients who copy a poem while we spell, right? While I'm reading and their body needs something to do, they'll copy a poem or they'll do a word search. So anything that is going to require some purposeful motor is going to be a great option as a body engager. All right, a little less fun, but still great options for purposeful motor are household chores, right? Again, you guys are all doing these at home anyway. So all of these are options, but what I really like to start with, if your speller is not already engaged in household chores, is to start simple and build on those skills. So we can start with the dishwasher. Right? Loading the dishwasher is going to be simple, more simple, because all the dishes are coming from one place and going to one place. So we have a limited number of movements we're going to have to do to be able to get the dishes from the sink to the dishwasher. If we want to level up, right, now we can take the clean dishes and put them away. Because now we're going to have to use multiple movements to find the cabinet that we need, open that cabinet, reach up and put the dish where it goes. If the cabinet's behind us, we're going to have to turn our body, use our eyes to find it, open that cabinet. So we're adding in more motor steps there. The same is true of laundry, right? Loading the washing machine or taking clothes out of the dryer is going to be a pretty simple place to start. But if we want to level up and as we gain motor control, offer more of a motor challenge, we can ask for, teach the purposeful motor of folding and then have the individual help you put all those clean clothes away. And any of the ones that are listed here, any of the chores that are listed here can be scaffolded that way. But we want to start simple and build as our motor control improves. A little more fun, right? Let's talk hobbies. So all of the hobbies I have listed, but pretty much all hobbies in general, require some purposeful motor, right? If we're taking up fitness as a hobby, we're going to have to think about how do I move my body and coordinate it to be able to carry out all the exercises that I need to do. If we're baking, I've got to have the motor control to pour things into a bowl, to stir, to grease a pan, right? Board games. If I want to be able to play, I often have to use ocular motor and my gross motor skills to move my piece around the board. With gardening, I've got to be able to use my motor skills as well. And so all hobbies are a great place to start because they're fun and engaging. If you have a speller that is fluently using the letterboard and you have that open communication, ask them, what are their interests? What kind of hobbies would they want to take up? Because if we have an interest in something, it's obviously going to be motivating to help support that purposeful motor practice. Another great way to start is if you as a family have hobbies, right? Start developing the purposeful motor needed to be involved in those hobbies so that you can make them as inclusive as possible. I love to start, I've got it pictured here on the slide, but I love to start in my office playing a game of Uno. Cognitively, it's a very simple game, so we can really focus on the motor aspects that are needed. right? And actually the motor that's needed to play Uno is very similar to the motor needed to use the letterboards. So we've got the cards in our hand, right? We've got to use our ocular motor to scan across the cards and find the one that we need. Then we've got to use an arm to stretch out, pinch the card that we need, pull it out of our hand and lay it down. But that ocular motor of eyes first, and then your hand follows, is great practice for spelling as well as purposeful motor practice. And finally, spelling to communicate lessons, right? Spelling itself is purposeful motor. We've got to think about using our eyes to find the letter we need, get your arm to poke through the letter that you need. And our lessons are designed to get that purposeful motor practice for pointing to letters. What you may not have noticed, right, is that in those lessons, we also have VACT questions, VAKT, which stands for visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. And these questions are very often designed to promote purposeful motor. They're designed to enhance learning off the boards. They're color-coded red. I may have mentioned that just a second ago, but they're color-coded red in your lesson. And they could be as simple as a point, right? Point to the power source of the hot air balloon in the picture. Or they could be a simple movement. So we're talking about how the planets orbit the sun. Let's stand up and use your body to orbit this chair, right? It might also be a full-on extension activity. So one of my favorite lessons that I use is about Ben and Jerry's, and we talk about ice cream. So maybe we're using, making ice cream in a bag as a part of that extension activity. If you are looking to practice purposeful motor, don't skip the VACT questions. Don't skip those opportunities to practice purposeful motor as a part of your spelling to communicate lesson. All right. Very often I get to this point and there are a lot of people asking, this sounds great. I want to incorporate more purposeful motor, but it seems like a long way from where we are right now. All of these options seem difficult from our current level of motor control and our current level of purposeful motor skill. And so when we're practicing purposeful motor, no matter where we're starting, we can use these three ideas to help support us, right? And help us get to the place where we can incorporate more of that purposeful motor. So those are presume competence, coach the motor, and incorporate different types of supports. So first we want to presume competence, right? We are very familiar with presuming competence in the brain, right? Presuming competence that our spellers can and want to learn at an age-appropriate level. So let's take that one step further and presume competence in the body, right? First, we want to assume that the speller hears and understands what's being asked of them. If we offer an instruction, we can be pretty confident that the individual has heard us. And so we don't need to necessarily repeat instructions. We don't need to dumb down our instructions, right? They've heard us and they understand what's being asked of them. Then we want to assume that they can and want to participate, but their body is the piece that's standing in the way, right? If we go back to talking about apraxia, which we know that our spellers deal with, the brain knows what it wants to do and is sending those signals to the body, but they don't always make it. And the body is what is difficult to coordinate to be able to follow through on the task. And so we want to assume that they can and want to participate. And then we want to support them in following through. And these next two tips are going to be things that help us in supporting them in following through on the task. All right. So the first one that we really, really want to focus on here is to coach the motor. Because of the breakdown in that process of praxis, right, that brain-body disconnect, we can offer the most effective feedback. That internal feedback is often really difficult. So we can offer an external feedback loop for our spellers by coaching the body directly. If you take nothing else from tonight's presentation, this formula is what I want you to take away, right? Instead of using a cue for the brain that the brain then has to turn into a cue for the body, I want to use a cue that is going to coach the direct body part, right? So I want to use an actionable verb: push, lift, step, pull, something that is going to be an actionable lift, something that's going to be an actionable verb there, plus our body part, right? So arms, push with your arms, right? Lift your foot, step with your foot, push with your legs to push your body up out of a chair, right? Actionable verb plus body part, and that's how you're going to get the way that you're coaching. So I'm going to let you guys get a little bit of practice with this in just a second, right? So be thinking of some ways that you can use that formula. But I want to give you kind of that shift, right? So if I use a cue like come here, right? That's a cue that the brain now has to turn into a message for the body. But if I say take 2 steps forward, I'm coaching the body directly, right? So instead of using a cue that the brain has to turn into a cue for the body, I can bypass that disconnect and talk directly to the body. Sometimes I end up with a hand in my hair during a session, right? And I can use a cue like let go or stop or gentle hands, right? I can use a cue like that, but that's a cue that the brain has to turn into a message to the body. So instead, I want to use a cue like open your hand or spread your fingers so that I can be talking directly to the body rather than talking to the brain in that moment. So when you are ready, go ahead and drop in the chat an example of using this, this formula that might be effective with some of your speller. Ways that we might be able to coach the body directly. Yeah, squeeze your hand. Ooh, Tracy, I love that. Lift your chest rather than sit up straight. To sit, yeah, bend your knees. I also love to sit, push your hips back, right? Those are great examples. Yes, if you've got somebody who's picking things up, right? Stand up, walk forward, rather than, oh no, stop. Don't pick those up. If we can coach that body directly, it's going to be much more effective. Ooh, yeah. If we're holding on to a pencil or a stylus, push your fingers together. Excellent. Instead of clean up, open your hand, drop it in the basket. Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes making that shift is tricky at first, right? Because we've used those cognitive cues or cues that are going to tell the brain what we want it to do, right? For so long. But if you can, this is the thing that made the biggest difference in my practice when I started supporting bodies with this direct motor coaching rather than waiting for the brain to turn it into a cue for the body. Practice, again, practice makes permanent for us too, right? So getting the practice with coaching like this is going to be very helpful in your purposeful motor practice. Ooh, yeah, push the soap out of your hair when rinsing hair. That's an excellent one. I hadn't thought of that, but that's excellent. All right. And then finally, we want to add in different types of support, right? So we're going to be using an auditory support when we're motor coaching, right? We're using our voice to communicate those motor coaching ideas. If that's not quite enough to support your speller, let's add in some different types of support. So visual. I have these like silicone dots is what I call them, that I use that are a great thing for if I need somebody to put their feet in a very specific place on the floor, or I need their hands to be at a specific place on the table, or I need to mark a place on the table where they're going to be putting things, right? A visual support like something like this is very effective. Instead of saying, okay, hold your feet still, right? I can say, keep both your feet on that orange dot, and give them that visual piece as well. This is something, Rose, that is going to be effective with impulsive bodies as well. I also love painter's tape, right? It's my best friend, where I can put an X on the wall or on the table or on the floor where I need to mark a visual spot of, if we're doing wall push-ups, I want your hands on these two X's, so that I can help support that movement through the visual piece as well. If I want to add in a little tactile, if I've got somebody who's having a really hard time moving part of their body, I might give them just a tap on the part of the body that I need to move. So we've got a little bit of that tactile input as well that's helping us get the message from the brain to the body part. And then one of my personal favorites is rhythm. Going back to our walk, right? If we're trying to move at a certain pace, or just a functional pace, right? For some of our bodies, especially impulsive bodies, if we're moving really fast, it's not functional. It doesn't support that purposeful motor, and we need to slow down. So I can use my voice and my rhythm to affect that. I can say, all right, first we're going to step forward, one more step forward, lift your foot, think about slowing down. And by slowing my body down, slowing my voice down, I can help impact that speed, right? Or if I've got somebody who's moving really slowly and it's not functional, I can bump it up. I can say, all right, here we go. 2 steps forward, move your feet, keep walking, 2 steps forward, and bump it up. This goes for all of us, right? If you have ever been really stressed out and gone into a spa where everyone is talking to you quietly and softly, right? Your body starts to slow down, you start to relax your body. Or you've been in a room with somebody who talks really fast, and by the end you're like, whew, I need a break, because you have been moving at that same speed. So we can use that to our advantage and kind of offset the speed of the individual that we're working with if we need to. All right. And then my last thing that I want to share is keep practicing. Motor control is not something that comes overnight. It takes sometimes a long time to develop those strong, purposeful motor movements. So keep practicing. It's slow or it doesn't look exactly as you think it should. Keep working. As long as you are coaching the body and you are practicing functional movement patterns, you're on the right track. All right. So we're at the point now where I am ready to take any questions that you have. My contact info is also here on the screen. And so I am a resource to you guys. If you have questions, if you need specific support for a motor issue, reach out to me and let me know. I'd love to help you. If you're working with a spelling to communicate practitioner, they likely can also support this, right? We have trained them in purposeful motor, and so they can help you with these pieces as well. If you are a practitioner or a practitioner in training, also please use me and the other practitioners who have practiced this longer as a resource to help support you in the purposeful motor realm as well. All right, some good questions coming in. All right, I'm going to read this one aloud so that everybody can kind of be on the same page. So we've got a toileting question as far as apraxia is concerned. Our 11-year-old has just started open communication and the topic of toilet accidents came up. He has persistent accidents and all the support systems have not helped. He spelled that his main issue is that he can't move his body to go to the toilet. He's very aware when he needs to go. He's highly apraxic, so even basic motor tasks like pulling up pants are still a big challenge. Yeah, absolutely. And initiation is a big issue. Any ideas other than a toilet schedule? Yeah, absolutely. So, and you already kind of are touching on this too. If initiation is difficult in one area, it's likely going to be difficult across the board, right? So that toilet schedule is definitely going to help, but I would start practicing initiation in other areas where the physiological need is not quite so daunting, that we're not feeling a pressure of, ooh, I have to go to the bathroom, I have to initiate right now. So getting some practice with initiation when the stakes are a little lower is a really great idea. When I start practicing initiation, I first have a conversation with my speller and I say, okay, we're going to work on initiation. Here is the movement that we're going to initiate, right? We're going to stand up and walk to the door. And then I have them sit and I give them a second to let them initiate. And then I start that motor coaching, right? And I keep practicing it and practice with that motor coaching to help support the steps needed to get up out of the chair and move across the room. And over time, I'm giving them more and more time to initiate that themselves so that they're getting the practice with that initiation piece. Also using some initiation cues, just like we do on the boards, right? Ready, go. Get your body started. Think about your body, ready, go. Something that's gonna help give that initiation prompt. And that's where, when you have no idea when he needs to go to the bathroom, right? That's why I would start practicing initiation across the board before you practice initiation with toileting, so that it's not such a challenge in trying to decide when do we need to get started with that. Yeah, so start in other areas and then move on to initiation with toileting. Tracy, I will look at this in just a second and let you know if that's what I was looking at or not. And Rose, it does. It takes a lot of practice to remember to give the instructions, right? When we have been able to, with other neurotypical people our whole lives, give an instruction to the brain, like come here or let go or stop that, and then be able to follow through, it's hard for us to change the mindset that our individuals really have a difficulty following through. And it's not that they don't hear us or don't want to, but they have a hard time getting their bodies to move forward. Yeah, absolutely. If you've done it for 21 years, it's very ingrained. And so that can be a real challenge. But again, practice makes permanent. So start practicing, and over time, it'll come. As a practitioner, oh, excuse me. Okay, maybe I don't have to sneeze. Whew. As a practitioner, does my purposeful motor activity always have to relate to my lesson, or is it okay to be a different topic? If it can relate to your lesson, fantastic, right? I do, as a part of my practice for purposeful motor, I will do something that I call wall words, right? And so I'll take index cards and rip them in half and put a piece of tape on the top of each one and tape them to the wall. And then I'll put the letters or a word that goes with our lesson on each card, right? So maybe our word is planets, and I've got each letter on one card, and I sort of scramble the letters right up on the wall. And then I'll have my individual walk over to the letters, find the one they need, pinch and pull it off. And then depending on the level of purposeful motor control we have, we'll either walk across the room and put it on the other side, or we'll move through some obstacles, right? Maybe we've got to step up and over something. We've got to crawl underneath something. But so we're working in purposeful motor, and the motor itself doesn't have anything to do with the lesson, but the word is adding a cognitive piece that came from our lesson. So if you can integrate it at all, that's fantastic. But I also have other spellers who come and see me, and as an occupational therapist, not everybody that sees me is seeing me just for spelling. So I will also see some people who come just to work out with me. So again, matching that with your goals is going to be the important piece there. Resistance can be excellent as well. What I really want to focus on when I'm practicing with purposeful motor, though, with the resistance piece, is that we are moving against the resistance intentionally rather than reflexively, right? If somebody pushes me or leans into me, I'm going to reflexively lean back. So not super intentionally. If we're using that resistance, I still want to make sure that it's purposeful. Now, proprioceptive support, right, where we're offering that deep pressure at different times, it is going to be supportive of the nervous system to be able to work together a little bit more effectively. New to spelling and having a hard time getting the eyes on the board. Coach the eyes just like I laid out for coaching the body, right? Eyes to it. Shift those eyes all the way to the left. Eyes to the corner. Get those eyes on your letter. Move your eyes. Shift your eyes. Pull your eyes to the corner. Whatever you want to coach those eyes, use that motor coaching strategy as well. And you can practice with the eyes anytime you're not on the boards too, right? I mentioned when I was doing the Praxis demonstration that if I need to get that cup, I've got to first move my eyes to it. So focus on coaching the eyes even in times when you're not on the board. So we're getting some practice, some purposeful motor practice for the eyes. What do you think of the idea of having stations for different motor movements, either to do individually or as part of a circuit? You can absolutely do that, right? Where you've got different stations in one room and you're moving around to do different movements at each station. Absolutely. The one thing I would say is don't have the individual do the same movement at the same station each time, right? Because then what we're doing is creating that automaticity of when I get to this station, this is what my body is supposed to do. We want to keep it purposeful rather than letting it become automatic. Also in a large space, move all the way across that large space, right? Don't feel like you've got to use we can only move when we're at a station. Use something like a march or walking backwards or grapevine to move all the way across that large space. Right. Anything else? All right. Well, I have loved getting to be with you tonight. Again, Rose, yes, I do consult. Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to me. My info is right here on the screen. If we're teaching to unload the dishwasher, how can we avoid getting this into a loop? Again, focusing on keeping it as purposeful as possible, right? I want you to find the plate. Get the plate. Now find the fork. The fork is going to go in this space. And if you find that it is becoming a loop, you want to shake it up and do it differently, or move on to another task that is going to be more purposeful. But what you don't want to do if you're loading the dishwasher is always start with plates and put them in exactly the same way, and then move on to forks and put them in exactly the same way. You want to make sure that you're making it a little bit different every time. And some automaticity here, right, is not a terrible thing. I load the dishwasher automatically at this point, right? And that's functional for me. If I've got a dish, I wash it off, I stick it in the dishwasher. But if you're using it to practice purposeful motor, you want to make sure that you're just keeping it as purposeful as possible. Sure, mixing up the number of reps at each station in your basement, Stacy, would definitely keep it purposeful. And again, doing it one way this time, where we've got this exercise at each station, and then the next time that we come down for a workout, we've got a different exercise at the stations, so that you're just not associating at this station we do squats. When we get to the orange dot, we do squats, is what we want to do. Very nice. Excellent. All right. You guys have my information here. Oh, hey, Sam. If you need anything at all from me, if I can offer any sort of support, please reach out and let me know. I'm happy to help. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.